Hi, this is Bobby from Rabid Rogue, and I wanted to demo my Pandemic Dominator app. If you're familiar with any of my other apps, I have other board game assistant apps like the Resistance Companion, which helps out setting up the resistance, Sushi Go, which helps do the scoring, and then other apps that kind of just give flavor, like Betrayal at House on the Hill, a soundboard, and just for fun sort of thing. This is the Pandemic Dominator. And what it does is it really maximizes your game of Pandemic. So I just wanted to show it off here, and I'm also looking for beta testers, so make sure to contact me if you're interested. But just a quick demo. You start off and you just put in your however many players you have, the number of events. This is for the basic game. 4 players, 5 events is normal. All the way up to 10 for Pandemic Legacy, and then some features that are affected by the different expansions. Now, not everything is available here, but everything that will affect your decisions in the game, as far as what this app covers is concerned, is called for. So let's just say a pretty vanilla game, 4 players, 5 events, 5 epidemics. Start it out, and then we could start with some player names. I'll just put myself, and then my other Pandemic Legacy homies. We got Louise, can't forget Corla, and last and least, Anton. So now that everybody's in, you see it resizes based on how big everyone's names is. We all have pretty short names. But this here, and this collapses most of the time, but you could scroll down and see exactly where the game is going to end. So we know after, on the 26th turn, Louise, that's going to be the last turn. And you see this here with the turns left. This is important because a lot of times you don't realize that you don't have enough time to do everything you want to do, especially in a legacy version. And it also tells you how likely the next epidemic is going to come up. But let's follow the instructions here, and then we draw our starting infection cards. So our 9 cards, let's just pick 9 random cards, whatever. And then these come in here. So if we scroll down here, we can see the discarded affections. So these are the 9 cards in the discard pile. So you could always view what's discarded by going here, which isn't that helpful because in the game you could always look and see where which cards are discarded. But this will make more sense in a second. So right now it's asking for the starting player cards. So let's just give ourselves some random cards here. Let's see, event, and let me just undo. That's another thing. Everything is undoable. But events have this black and white stripe because that's what the cards look like at the top. And then epidemics are green. So this just kind of slides away automatically once you're done putting it in. And so you draw your first card. Now, this doesn't tell you to take your actions. It's just sort of implied. Because you don't really need to input what your actions are. It doesn't matter for the purposes of this Dominator app. What this does is this keeps track of which cards you've drawn, so it tells you the likelihood of other cards being drawn and what's coming up. So your actions are really irrelevant here. So let's say you take your actions. Let's say I move and I cure something, whatever, it doesn't matter. And then I draw a black card. Now it's telling me to draw my second card. Let's say it's a red card. So if you notice here, just keep an eye on this triangle. This moves every time someone's turn goes. Actually, even when you draw your first card. Because this bar represents all the player cards, which is really the length of the game. Assuming that you don't die from running out of cubes or having too many outbreaks. So this moves every time you draw a player card or the turn ends. So keep an eye on that. And this gives you an idea of where you are in the game. Also, the turns left tells you how many turns you have left. So now it's telling you to draw the first infection card. So now we're still on new infections here that haven't shown up yet. So let's say Beijing gets drawn, and then Istanbul. Now it goes automatically to the next person. And of course, you could always open this back up and scroll around and see, just in case you made a mistake or something like that, or just curious. But it'll always go back to whoever the current player is. So now let's say Louise is unfortunate and she draws an epidemic. Now you can see already the epidemic risk has gone from medium to low. And the reason why it knows this is it keeps track of how many epidemic cards there are. So in this game, 5 epidemic cards, each represented by an E and by a segment here. And right now it's just in the middle because nobody knows where the epidemic card is. It's mixed in somewhere in each particular segment. But now we know where this one is. So this pin's in place, and this is going to stay there, and it's yellow to show that it's been selected. And we know that there's a low epidemic risk because we know that this is the only spot that another one could start to turn up. So from here, Louise draws her next card, and then the epidemic gets resolved after you have drawn both your cards. So it gives you the instructions. You're in the new section, and let's say Karachi is the unfortunate one that gets infected. And then once you're done shuffling in real life, shuffling the cards and placing them back on top of the deck, then when you hit Resolve Epidemic, watch over here, the infection deck. It takes the entire discarded pile, and those now become level 1 infections. And the reason why this is leveled out will make sense in a second. So if we scroll down here, there's level 1 infections, new infections, and then discarded infections. There's nothing in there, as you'd expect. So now Louise has to draw her infections, let's say Delhi and Lagos. So now it's Carla's turn, and we're feeling pretty good because we know from the app that we have 23 turns left, that there's very low chance of an epidemic coming up. And we could even see here, yeah, it's not going to happen. So we could be a little more open and free with our actions for the time being, knowing that we're pretty safe. So let's just grab a couple cards. Some more infections happen. Anton's turn. Let's go. Ooh, we get another event. Great. So keep on going. Let's do another turn. And of course, during this whole time, actions are taking place. So now we're at Louise, and 20 turns are left. And now notice the epidemic risk is medium, because we've passed this point, and so we don't know. The next card could be an epidemic, or it could not. We have no idea. So Louise draws her cards. Lucky for her, no infection. Now it's Carla's turn, and let's say she does draw another infection. So this is unfortunate. So we have level 1 infections here, and it tells you these will be drawn this turn. That's what the 1 turn means. It'll tell you how likely or when the cards in a level are going to be drawn. So let's just say the new infection is, let's say, Khartoum. So now we have to resolve the epidemic, which means we've shuffled the discard pile and placed it back on top. Now notice this is level 1. We got Montreal and Osaka. Once we resolve the epidemic, now we have a new level 1. These are the discarded cards that just got placed on top. And then notice Montreal and Osaka are now level 2. And those are going to come in turns 6 and 7 from now. Assuming there's no more epidemics before turn 6 and 7, we know this is here. So the reason why this is important is right now we don't know what order any of these are in. You know, the next card could be London, could be Istanbul, could be any of these. But once we do go through all these, and all these are drawn, because we have this written down in the app, we know that the next 2 cards will be Montreal and Osaka. Now that's very difficult to remember if you're playing the game, remember what's coming up and what's not. But this makes it very easy, especially if another epidemic is drawn before, then we'll have a pretty good idea what the level 2 and level 3 cards are going to be, and then we can make our decisions based on that. So just to go through this a little more. Oh, and here's another thing. It told me I was supposed to draw infections. It will stop you from doing the wrong things, such as I just tried to draw a player card, which doesn't make any sense. So let's do that, and let's speed it up a little bit. So let me cut in right here. So now the app is telling you that you have 14 turns left. The epidemic risk is medium, which you could also just visually see here where you are. And as this gets further down, the risk is going to go higher to the point where you're almost guaranteed to draw an epidemic. Here in the infections, we know the next card is going to be Los Angeles and then either Montreal or Osaka, and then the following turn will be whichever wasn't drawn out of Montreal and Osaka, and then new cards will start coming into play. So this is very useful for being able to tell, basically remember, what's coming up and not having to write it down or just work on your faulty memory. It's Carla's turn. There's 11 turns left, and the epidemic risk is very high because we're all the way at the end of the pile and we haven't drawn it yet, which means that we're almost guaranteed to draw it in the next turn or two. Now this is particularly risky because in theory you could draw one next turn and then you could draw one in the same turn if it gets to that point, which I'm sure we've all either seen or heard happen. Drawing two epidemics in the same turn can be devastating, and this at least gives you a heads up because you know that this is a definite danger right here. Whereas usually when you play with the game, you have a vague sense that, oh, I think it's been a while since an epidemic, but I'm not so sure. But then you think that if you draw one, you're not likely to draw another one anytime soon. But you could see this case visually here. It's not very unlikely that that could happen here. And so this flashes to let you know that there is a high risk. Now, something else I wanted to show is sometimes if you're discarding a lot of cards, you want to know how many you have left so you can make the best decisions. And you can do that by hitting this button here. And you can leave this toggled if you want. If you don't need the words, you could just kind of see there's 3 black cards left. There's only 4 yellow cards left. So maybe we shouldn't discard many of those if we haven't cured it yet. So, and you could just use these like you would use it with the names, and it'll have the correct information on it, as long as you put the right stuff in. And of course it tells you how many epidemics you have left, which you could tell by looking in multiple spots. So one other thing, certain events affect what happened in this game, and there's an events tab. Now obviously there are many more events than this, but a lot of them just affect things that happen on the board or your actions. So these are the only ones that affect what happens in this game, such as One Quiet Night. So if I click it now, you can click it at any time. It'll remember that your next infection just basically shouldn't happen. So Anton, once he draws his 2 cards, he's got his black card and he goes blue card and boom, goes right to Bobby's turn. No infections. Same thing with resilient population and just different events. Now, for reordering, such as forecasts, this will just tell you that you could reorder them at any time. So if you know what's happening in a particular order, like let's say you know Chicago's coming up before Baghdad because you use the forecast card or certain events from Pandemic Legacy. So something else to point out is Pandemic Dominator will keep track of how many turns are left, and it'll start flashing right around when 8 turns are left. So that's about 2 turns per player if it's a 4-player game. And this seems to be a good time to start really planning and making your last-ditch efforts and plans. So it'll flash there. Everything can be undone. So if you undo and you go back, and now we're at 9 turns, no more flashing, no more risk. Because it is pretty easy to make mistakes when tapping on things, and even make mistakes in the board game. And I thought I was supposed to draw a player card, I was supposed to draw an infection card, whatever. So the app is pretty forgiving for that. But in general, this really helps make your planning. Just takes all the sort of memory out of it, and pen and paper if you're using that. And it just gives you a little bit of a leg up, and it's really useful if you're going to play with, say, 6 or 7 epidemics, or Pandemic Legacy, where every move you do could make a difference. So I'm looking for beta testers, particularly anyone who has any notes on design or user interface or user experience. Any new features that would be good for this app. Now, we're not trying to do a full simulation of Pandemic. We're just trying to help make the best decisions. So I'm going to put an email address. You can contact me if you'd like to beta test this, and then you can get the app for free. Thanks.